this, we handed out last week the information packet on this, which Suzanne kindly recopied for us. And so it's the yellow information packet that we had last week. And then she's passing out for you today the letter that we sent to the Transportation Committee late on Thursday, recommending that they excise from LD 1320 sections 10 through 15 of the bill. So, and also said to them that you were interested in those issues and that you would consider a committee bill that addresses those issues. Now, those issues are quite contentious. They were very contentious at the public hearing, and so you have a copy of all the testimony that came in on the public hearing, and this packet I did not make you all copies of, but I can pass it around. Let's start with Representative Block. That is some of the, so I start the other direction. Some of the scientific information about THC blood levels. That is really the foundation for most of the provisions in 10 through 15. There is also there's also section 12, which authorizes law enforcement's use of preliminary breath testing devices to screen whether motor vehicle operators are under the influence of intoxicants. That is a test for alcohol levels. So section 12 is about alcohol levels, not about THC. The rest of the bill, 10 through 15, is about THC. Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was wondering, is there a test where they can do a breathalyzer of some sort to check for the marijuana and the amount that's in the system?
Representative Babbitt.
The answer, Representative Long, is no. That's the first part of your question. The second part of your question, to which we don't know the answer, is what level of THC constitutes impairment. There are no scientific studies on that.
Well, there may be studies, but I'm not sure there's an agreement, scientific agreement. Representative Powell.
I'd be interested in having somebody from the department come up and talk as to why they put this in the bill. And to me, that would be kind of the starting point as to why it showed up.
Good afternoon, Senator Rosen, Representative Fowler, members of the Standing Committee on Rural Justice and Public Safety. My name is Robert O'Connell. I'm the Director of Legal Affairs, Adjudications, and Hearings at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles within the Department of the Secretary of State. Prior to the legislative session, the Secretary of State convened an informal group, task force, if you will, to examine impaired driving issues. Initially, the Secretary of State was exploring the possibility of lowering the blood alcohol level and requested information from the group on whether that was advisable. The group indicated that that was not advisable at this time, but law enforcement people on that committee indicated that you really ought to examine the existing laws on drugs, specifically marijuana or THC. After and there was no formal report, no formal document generated as a result of that. After that, it was widely reported in the press that an agency other than the Department of the Secretary of State was going to introduce legislation concerning the use of preliminary breath tests for alcohol and legislation to establish a specific nanogram level of THC that would constitute operating under the influence. That did not happen. The Secretary of State was interested because this is a growing, continuing problem in introducing legislation. The only vehicle available at that time, because it was well after the deadline, was the Department of Secretary of State Bureau of Motor Vehicles bill to amend various motor vehicle laws. And that's the history of why it came about, and it's in the department's bill before the Joint Standing Committee on Transportation.
I see. That makes more sense. Any questions for Mr. Farnhall? We have.
Don't think it's all in there.
Committee? Representative Schnapp?
As I'm thoroughly trying to read through the THC documentation on the desk here, I guess a point of clarification for the committee: are we opening up for a public hearing on this piece, or holding it over to have a public hearing? I just think that clearly the Transportation Committee had a wealth of conversations with people on both sides. I have yet to be able to hear both sides of that argument, and in order for me to make an informed decision, I need to hear the same kind of things that the Transportation Committee heard. I can read it on a piece of paper, but we should be able to have that opportunity to ask questions, to delve into this topic, and for an opportunity for the public on this particular topic to be heard, separate from an omnibus department bill. This is too important to be hidden in a bigger bill. So I think a public hearing would be in order, whether we want to set that at another time or how that process would shape down, but that would be where I would like to see this happen.
I agree. Representative Vaughn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I would actually like to see is, we had a real number of what the level 1 blood constitutes operating under the influence. I would like to see if we could get a group together and sit down and discuss these issues. But we can go around this horseshoe and every one of us can decide on a different number what should go forward. I'd like to have the science behind the issue going forward if we're going to make these decisions. I really think we should know what we're talking about, because I've heard people talk some places as low as 0.5 and other places up as much as 15. I'd like to know what constitutes operating under the influence of THC. So whether it's we get a committee together for the summer, or bring a group of people together, experts, and actually come up with something and work the bill next year, so we get some facts to go on. That's what I'd like to see, but that's up to the committee.
So you'd like to hold it over?
But I would like to hear everybody else's input, because I don't want to go and say 0.05, 15, 25, I don't know what it is, so how can we technically make a law if we don't know what we're talking about?
Representative Abbott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Representative Vaughn. Representative Jeanette has what appears to be about 10 pounds of documents for various study on the subject. And what we've seen in the letter from Shannon Bellows is that statutes operate under the influence of marijuana, what the THC level is. I think if we proceed in this, just let it pass, we're opening a can of worms. Well, I'd like to be back in private practice on a client charge, because then I think you have some real fun. Thank you.
Representative Long, would you like to make a motion?
That's correct, Jane. We don't have anything to carry over, but our recommendations on patents 10 through 15, we can hang on to. And we can, the chairs can make the recommendation that be a working group put together to actually come up with the numbers we need. And I don't know if we can get a motion if we need such.
Representative Schmidt?
Sorry.
So just a point of clarification, Jane. Depending on how we move forward, what happens to the Omnibus department bill? Like if we say we want to hold our section, right, off to the side, don't they, they're still going to send that to the floor, right? Or are they going to take out those particular sections that we have concerns over and just pass the Omnibus bill without the sections that we're looking to have oversight over?
That's what the committee asked them to do, was to amend out sections 10 through 15. Whatever else they did with the rest of the bill, take 10
So
through
that has
15.
already been taken out.
I am not aware that, have they voted yet? Did they vote it out?
Yes.
Yeah. And they voted 10 to 15 back.
Oh, Ms. Rushlock, come on up.
I have a question for the committee, an observation. My name is Jeff Rushlock, I'm a district attorney for the Mid-Coast area. When the bill was submitted, in section 12 of the bill, there are two subparts of that, the first part of which has to do with THC level, which is only about operating under the influence of THC. The second part, and I think they were put together in drafting because they both had to do with use of evidentiary rules, but the second part, on preliminary breath testing devices, has nothing whatsoever to do with THC. So my question of the committee will be, did you really intend to have the preliminary breath testing devices included in deferring to next year, or did you want to take separate action on that? And I just asked that question because it is a totally separate issue. And the Transportation Committee, when it voted the rest of 13 pointing out, did not have that PBT portion before it. They had taken out all of sections 10 to 15, as I recall. So they did not act on that themselves. So it's sort of in limbo right now. That's just a question I have for you as to how to address that.
Jane, what would be your recommendation?
Well, I think we need a separate discussion on the preliminary breath test part of section 12 of the bill. And then when we get to it, we need a little more crystallized idea of what you would be doing in terms of a working group or on the THC level. But I think the first thing to discuss is the preliminary breath test piece.
Representative Schmidt?
Okay, I'm sorry if I'm kind of belaboring this point, but I'm just trying to get firm details. So if we recommend a working group, we can do that right now. We have the authority to establish a working group. And we have the authority to establish a committee bill in the next session after that, the transportation already taking a vote on the bill itself. What is the vehicle we're playing with, I guess is one question.
You'd have to submit a joint order to do anything, whether it was a working group or to report out.
So just a follow-up question to that. this is just something to ponder. Because I've said this about somebody else's bill that came before us and needed a lot of work. And the work was not really done before this committee. Is the department wanting to submit another bill that just handles disputes rather than us put in a, like, I guess, is there somebody else that's wanting to put in that bill rather than us putting in a committee bill? Like, if the department really wants that, where is that standalone bill? Like, would they be willing to put in that standalone bill for the next regular session? Or do we need to actually take on, I mean, is that a priority of the committee that we want to do our own committee bill on something like that? Or can the department just put in a bill that clearly is a priority for them? Is it really a priority for us?
Representative Long?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The letter we sent to transportation, I think we told them that we would be sending out a committee bill to refer to this. And yes, to answer Representative Jeanette's question, the department can always come forward with a bill, they can do that at any time. So it's just a matter of where we go. They've already made their presentation, we have a lot of the information in front of us where we need to go with the THC levels. As far as breathalyzer for the alcohol, that is a separate subject, but if we're going to put out a bill, I think we can actually deal with them at the same time, so you only have one bill going forward, and it would incorporate everything that's here. It's just my observation, whether it's true or not.
Representative Bell?
So, but if we're doing, say, a study, a resolve to do a study, and that's what we report out in a joint order, number 12, is that something they need now? That was just kind of tied up in this other language, or is that something that can be put off? So
Mr. O'Connor?
I'm asking probably the people behind that.
I think Mr. O'Connell and I are both kind of at a loss about this. Once again, my name is Jeff Rushlow, and I think as he referenced earlier, the preliminary proposal was originally initiated by another agency of state government, but incorporated in this bill because it was of the same basic field. But I don't think there was any opposition at the public hearing in transportation to this portion of the bill. All the opposition was focused on the THC portion. It really is a totally standalone issue, which is whether or not these particular devices should be used by law enforcement in alcohol-related driving offenses and what value they would have a decision that they was affect whether or not to arrest the driver. So it really is a totally standalone issue, which I think was something that all the people that Mr. O'Connell talked about before the session were meeting to discuss generally impaired driving issues. That was one of the things many people thought was important to do. But don't know what else to say beyond that. So.
Can I ask, what are the preliminary breath test devices that are approved by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on lines 23 through 24? Is there such a thing?
Yes, these devices have actually been used for decades. In Maine, they were kind of widely used about 20 years ago. But there were some Maine Supreme Court decisions that cast doubt on whether or not they should be used because, unlike a self-contained breath testing device, which is used in a law enforcement facility to get an actual blood alcohol test result, they weren't calibrated on a regular basis. So 20 years ago, they sort of fell out of favor. But I think the history since that time has been that they are more and more widely used in the preliminary stages of an investigation. The officer has the individual go into it. It indicates on a preliminary basis whether or not their blood alcohol level might exceed the legal limit. And at that point, the officer is then intended to go ahead and do the rest of the full-fledged investigation involving standardized field sobriety testing and decide whether or not to arrest the person and charge them with alcohol-related offense. So it's technology that's been around a long time, and I think it's gaining ever greater utility in the field.
Representative Long?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under section 5, it also makes it so that they can find the test if they want to go for take the chemical test, so it's not mandatory that this is done, it's a suggestion you can use, so.
Yes. It's exactly the same as any other type of sobriety testing. A person can say, I'm not going to walk the line for it.
Well, actually, I did have a question about that. I'm glad you brought that up because on the next page, on line 4, it says a person who submits to the preliminary breath test, which I assume that's voluntary.
Yes.
Then on line 4, it says shall submit to and complete a chemical test. So if the driver agrees to the preliminary test, then they must take the chemical test, the way this is written.
I hope it's not intended to be that way, because what that means is the driver can't say, well, I blew into the other device, so therefore I don't have to go blow into the regular full-fledged drug testing.
The way I read it, upon a law enforcement officer's request, then don't necessarily have to do it, but if they choose to, then they'll still have to go through the chemical test.
Thank you.
Mr. Pelletier?
John Pelletier, Chair of the Criminal Law Advisory Commission. One of the things I did last week was send out the materials for this LD to the CLAP members. And I didn't get much of a response, but the one response I got by email was from someone who pointed out, as Mr. Rushlow said, that a long time ago, the Maine Supreme Court ruled these similar devices were inadmissible, not to be used. Now, what Mr. Rushlow said is that in his, and I'm not familiar with this, so I don't have any, but he's a prosecutor, he would be familiar with it, and he says that these things are gaining more acceptance and have more and more scientific basis. And I have no reason to doubt that. As the bill is drafted, it says that the device has to be approved by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Maine's DHHS. There has to be training at the Criminal Justice Academy. All things that, for me as a former defense lawyer, are reassuring. Okay, so I'm going to put that out there. But it also seems to me, given the history we have in Maine with the law court saying having trouble with these devices, and what Mr. Rushlow said about it's gaining more and more acceptance, that is sort of the same question. What is the scientific validity of a device for use in criminal operating under the influence cases? So to me, that's a similar question. Looking through that, it may be that the answer is simple, but I don't know whether there's controversy or not. But it seems to me that's a similar question to investigating what's the appropriate level of testing for THC. And so I guess my personal opinion is that I think it would be appropriate for a work group to look at it, based primarily on the history in Maine, that the law court certainly frowned on it when it came up a long time ago.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
Could we, if you're interested in a working group on this, could you give me a little more to draft with?
Yes,
Representative Long?
I'll try this. Fill in the blanks if we can. What we need to do is to establish a level in the blood, THC, that constitutes operating under the influence. That's one of the critical areas of the. We've also got to go forward and come up with a test that's uniform for everybody to use, that's accepted statewide, federally. I don't know what tests are up there, I don't know the slightest. But if we're going to test this, we should have something that's checked. There's no doubt about it, whether it's a blood test, a chemical test, whatever. I realize it's going to be a cost for these tests, but in that we're gonna have to come up with a remedy, how we're gonna deal with the fines, penalties, are we gonna have that, person that's convicted to cover the cost of this, or is it, how's it gonna be absorbed? These are the questions that we're gonna have to answer going forward.
So do you want, there are a number of different ways of doing the work. You can decide that you want to do that yourself and ask for meetings over the interim, maybe oftentimes committees are approved for, say, up to 3 meetings. So you could make that the focus of your interim work. Or you could name somebody in charge and have members of the public and legislators appointed to it, a regular study. Or you could appoint somebody to be in charge and to convene the working group the way I think you've done a couple of those. It's a more informal working group. It doesn't have to go through the full legislative process. So there's really, I can see at least 3 ways to do that.
Representative Wong.
I think if we're gonna go forward, we should put a group together and not include representatives or senators on that, because if we do this, you're gonna put a fiscal note on it, because they're gonna have to pay stipends for travel and whatnot. But I think that we're capable of putting people, you need people in the department, Health Human Services, a number of people to put onto this that would actually work through the course of the summer, report to us in December, and then the chairs can submit a joint bill to the Ledge Council, and we go forward that way. We have a public hearing that representatives met. Once, make sure we hear both sides of the issue, and it'll take care of a number of concerns going forward. But I think we can come up with a group that could get together and get the information and come back with a consensus for this body. That's just one way.
How does the committee feel? Representative Garrett?
Thank you. I would support that as well. Just in my mind, I was thinking about people that would have some expertise in that field. Maybe someone from, DEA and Maine State Police.
Representative Wong.
Not to mention the criminal justice academy, because they're gonna have to start teaching this, and they're gonna want some input so they can work into the schedule so it doesn't put an undue burden on them also. Like I said, we could sit down and discuss people, but I think that I trust the chairs enough, they can sit down and come up with who they want, and if they want more recommendations, we all got plenty we can get from this. So,
That's a good idea. Representative Schmidt?
I'd also like to have some people on it that are going to push back to this idea. I don't want just all yes people on the working group, especially when in our conversations about potentially legalizing marijuana and all of this. I just want to make sure that a lot of different aspects are taken into consideration. Whoever gave us this big packet, I still don't know who, but
Came from the analyst for transportation.
yeah, so I don't know if there's somebody that's related to that topic that you could see in some sort of expert on THC or that has a lot of background in that. Somebody from outside government would probably be my preference too, just to add some flavor to the working group so that it's not all yes for this certain thing. So I can't identify somebody off the top of my head, but if there's somebody that we can identify at some point, I think that would be helpful.
Representative Wong, your dad's going up and down.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think about Paul over here. He works with a lot of the people dealing with marijuana, whether it's providers and everything else. I have no expertise in it, nor do I want to have it, so I just know, I've been here for 5 years. He works with a number of different providers and everything else, and maybe they have an input that's different from where I, well, I know it's different from where I'm from. So that'd be a suggestion I have. If not him, somebody who can feel pretty ready.
Representative Cobb?
So Jeannie, would it make sense where it was, I believe, the Secretary of State that brought this bill forward, that we put them kind of in charge of the city group?
So we could.
I think that, I mean, if the city would be agreeable to that, I think that might be. And maybe as chairs, we can sit down with someone to come up with a group listing and bring that back to the committee to review.
Okay, so are you thinking about doing this just through a letter to the Secretary of State's office?
That almost might be the easier.
Is that a recommendation?
Because you don't have, I mean, at this point, you don't have a bill or resolve unless you put in a joint order to do that. But if the Secretary of State's office is willing to take the lead in convening the group, then you could do it in a letter. It's your choice.
I really like that idea. And Ricky, I like the way your hand goes up and down.
Yes, I think when the department brought the bill forward, they'd be more happy, well, I won't say happy, but they'd be more to
He'd be tickled pink.
I can't see him, he's behind James. So it was easy for me to ask.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll be having to work with the chairs and also with Bob McConnell to come up with some language that creates a broadly representative group and reports back to you before the next session. If you
Representative Schmidt?
So I'm reading one of the testimony that was submitted on this bill, and they've actually suggested a number of groups that could potentially be in contact. It's on Representative Russell's testimony, and I haven't vetted each of these groups. I don't know if we should do that, but it's something to ponder for Jane and the others. A drug recognition expert, the Maine Chiefs of Police, Maine Sheriff's Association, the ACLU, the Marijuana Policy Project, the Maine Association of Dispensary Operators, and the Medical Marijuana Caregivers of Maine, Maine DOT. So again, I just read that just because I just saw that, and it just as a potential base point.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Marijuana, the Maine Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, and the DAs.
Yes.
That's there.
Okay.
Any motion, or is that
Okay.
good?
No, I think, I think we should have a motion. It's a motion to send a letter.
Send a letter. I'll make a motion to send a letter.
Second.
All those in favor?
Thank you.